Good morning. We have 19 members present today and have apologies from Councillor Bell and Councillor Collins.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? No. And just remind everybody, this meeting will be recorded. Recording will be subsequently available for public listening. Minutes of the 19th of August, which were not on the original agenda, they've been left on the desk there. I think they're fairly straightforward. Members happy to accept them? Okay. Item 4 is the Regional Archives and Local Studies. Oh. Sorry, somebody's made a cock up here. I was told they'd be tabled before the meeting, and now there's been a change in plan. So we'll have them at the end of the meeting. An item of urgent business, I was told, be taken in their normal place. I don't know who's made the change, however. Move on to Regional Archives Local Studies project options. Following the decision of last month, the site for this facility would be the York Library. This report now presents us with 3 different potential options. These options are laid out in detail in the first 3 appendices, with Appendix 4 giving the anticipated ongoing revenue costs. Harry Hay and Graham Roberts, the Council's archivist, are here this morning to give us any further details required. Is there anything you guys want to add to the report?
Just very briefly, Chair, if I may, as you've pointed out, this committee considered this project at its August meeting, and following that, to take forward members' decisions, we went back to the Officer Strategic Asset Board, started more detailed liaison with Heritage Lottery Fund, and for both those reasons it became apparent that there was a range of different approaches we could adopt from a funding package perspective. So as a result, Strategic Asset Board asked us to come back to this committee to get members' input prior to it going to P&R committee, and we're very happy to answer any questions on that basis, Chair.
Thanks for that, Harry. Members get any questions to ask? Stephen Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a question just about the equipment and materials and other costs, just like for shelving, etc. And for the 3 different options, even though the sort of square footage or the footprint of the building varies from 2,000 to 1,200, I think it is, the equipment and materials and other, which is all to do with like taking up the space inside, is exactly the same. I'm just wondering how that would be accommodated in buildings with different floor spaces.
The main reason for that is that we'll still need the same amount of storage to start with. So the majority of the larger majority of the expenditure is on storage. So we'll need that anyway, and that's about 80% of the total spend on equipment. And even though the spaces will be smaller in the other areas, we'll still need most of the same equipment in those spaces too. So we thought at this stage it's going to make not a lot of difference, to be honest. So we thought we'd put in the same figure.
Thank you. Jane Maitland.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the officers, please. I have here background papers, a report to the Strategic Asset Board, 3 papers here. These are background papers which actually members wanted to see and understand, because they were the background papers that apparently indicated why we made the initial choice. Now, Chairman, I have to say that these papers are not available to us. There are no links to them. It's quite impossible to find them on the council website. I tried to find 4 members of staff, none of whom could tell me where they were, or some of whom were on holiday. So I'm afraid to say I think it's the case that I've been unable to delve into and understand fully the background in these papers. So I want to make that point to you at this stage. Now, dealing with the actual issues that come up in the report, I wonder if we could be talked through the issues of revenue support and what are the implications for the council through these proposals. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll deal with the Strategic Asset Board issue first, if I may, and then I'll hand over to Graham, who'll deal with the revenue consequences. Certainly, I've attended, along with Graham, I think 3 Strategic Asset Board meetings, and it's, I think, fair to say that we were robustly scrutinised in terms of what we were basing our proposals on, both from a capital and from a revenue perspective, and that information was all then subsequently contained in the report that came to CCS in August of this year, Councillor Maitland. So certainly it was a Strategic Asset Board that requested we come back to CCS committee prior to going to P&R committee, because there was a range of different options to be delivered based on different funding packages. So that's the background to that, but certainly I can assure members that the last report and this one doesn't miss out any key detail that members need to make a decision either at the August meeting or indeed this morning. Thanks, Chair. And Graham will deal with the revenue consequence question.
Yes, the revenue consequences you can split into 2 parts really. First of all, during the project life itself, until the lottery funding ends 3 years after the build is completed, that appears in Appendix 2 and 3. Appendix 4 covers what happens after the HLF funding finishes. Again, like I say, 3 years after the build completion, and we've gone a further 10 years, 7 years on, 10 years in total from when the building's finished in Appendix 4, and looked at that. It looks from the figures there as though we'll be spending about an extra 100,000 a year on revenue costs for staffing and other matters. But we've put a note down at the bottom there to say that the staffing costs we start with, we expect to reduce quite dramatically once lottery funding finishes, because the point of getting the professional staff in at the start, which is what the lottery demands anyway, is so that they can develop the new systems and ways we're going to work for the following time. So, for instance, the education officer would be working closely with the education department and people like that to work out the whole basis of the future progress. And then, as I've noted in the staffing cost bit at the bottom of Appendix 4, we could appoint somebody, either transfer somebody within the council, appoint somebody at a non-professional grade to carry that on. And that's standard practice which other authorities who've had heritage lottery funding for this kind of a project have done. So we think we can reduce the cost. We can also generate income. The example I've used is, because we'll have a digitisation suite, which will be a very high quality digitisation suite, we'll be able to do commercial work. And again, we're basing this on previous examples. Carlisle, for instance, with their new archive centre, they've completely funded their digitisation officer's post through commercial work, and then uses their spare time to do work for the council. So there's various options there. Another possibility for income generation would be renting out storage space until we need it. So in all the options, we're allowing for 20 years expansion space. That means we'll have quite a lot of empty shelving at the start of the project, which we can rent out. And we've looked into commercial rates for that, and we think that, for instance, would generate between 5,000 to 10,000 a year for renting out space. So there's quite a lot of options, and we think that 100,000 could easily be brought down to 50, and probably quite a lot less than that extra a year. And we think that to dramatically improve the quality of the service we're currently offering and to widen the scope of it, we think that's a reasonable cost to provide that kind of a service, which will be, in Scottish terms, outstanding. Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind, so we're talking about £50,000 extra. We think that's you're suggesting is going to be the extra cost, right? Thank you very much indeed. And I will say that the officer earlier talked about the fact that the information that we required to indicate why particular proposals had come to us, which options had come to us, was in the last report. Well, if you remember rightly, Chairman, the reason that we actually have got these background papers here is because we asked where the options had come from. And it was the the Director of Chief Executive Services, who told us that it was the Strategic Asset Board papers, and that everything had come through there. So, in fact, actually, it might well have been contained in the last report, but it was not explicit. And I would suggest to you the reason that we actually asked about it was because the information in that last report was, I'm afraid, rather thin and sketchy. So I'm sorry, I am concerned that members are basically walking into options here which are extremely expensive. There's public money, and it is not entirely clear to me that we are actually doing the right thing with respect to digitisation and access, which is what the public want now. I'm sure what we're proposing was absolutely first class 10 years ago. I'm not sure it's actually what should be done now. And it's not clear to me, this information here, Chairman, that we have the information we require to make certain that we are doing the right thing for the public.
Well, I mean, that's your opinion, obviously. I mean, we've got to take advice, and I've got professional officers here giving us advice. If you're not happy with that, that's entirely up to yourself. However, moving on, Finlay, and then Patsy.
Thanks, Chair. Certainly, looking at the options, you know, in my opinion, is that option one certainly seems the only viable option on the table. My concerns are officers suggesting that we will have spare storage, which could be used. That opens up a few questions. At which point will the building that's currently used for storing become redundant or not be used with the handover period? And I would have thought with an ongoing digitisation programme which will in effect reduce the number of archives we have, so potentially these committee papers and whatever that we've had printed out for us over the last 20, 30 years will actually become less, because they'll all be stored on computers and there'll not actually be any need for standard paper copies, so the amount of storage will actually reduce. So when the papers that are sitting at the Far East building just now are digitised, there'll actually not be no need for shelf storage. So I don't buy the idea, or I can't get my head around why there'll be spare storage at the moment which should be filled up, because any documents that are created from now on will surely be in a digital format anyway, and there's no need for them to be printed out and stored in shelves. That also brings into the question of the availability of the digital records. As we reduce the amount of records that we have, will these be available across the region? Will they be online? And so people in Stranraer or Castle Douglas will be able to view them. But certainly my main concern is that if we've got 80% storage, I can't get my head around why at the start of the project there may be spare shelf space, and that there should be more shelf space as these documents are digitised.
Thanks very much for the question. To take the digitisation question, what we will do with digitisation is to, yes, make stuff widely available that we've got in paper form now, but not to then dispose of the paper records we currently have. They would be retained. The difficulty with digitisation is, yes, you want to get the material out there. That's the purpose of digitisation. And it's a belt and braces, because you've got the two forms of media. Digitisation can be a really difficult thing, because long term, we're talking about, you know, what's going to happen in 100 years rather than 5 years. And as we know, every few years, you've got to migrate digital media to some other way of access. The classic one of the BBC Doomsday Project in the 1980s, in 86, where nearly all the electronic records were lost because they weren't migrated onto new media. And this is always a risk. And it's, now there may be some way of getting around this in 50 years' time or 20 years' time, but I don't think so with digital media, because you're always changing to new technology. So we keep the paper and we have the digital too. Now there's another side of that as well, which is born digital records. So if records are created digitally to start with, then you hardly ever make paper copies of them, and if they're only going to be in digital form permanently. So the other side of that is you need to have ways of digital curation. So you're keeping digital records as safely as you can, but they'll never be as safe as the paper records. So, and you can't print out every digital record you get. You can't print, I mean, we've got paper records 500-600 years old. If they'd been in digital form 500 years ago, I wouldn't like to say that they'd have that much chance of surviving till today. So we do need the storage, and then, but you're right that the amount we'll get in paper form will reduce. It will greatly reduce, and it's reducing now. But when you think there's lots of little organisations that still produce stuff in paper, not everything is produced digitally even today. There's an awful lot still produced in paper. And we'll still be taking paper records in for a good long time because there'll be lots of historical paper records that are coming in. I mean, there's big collections that families own, going back hundreds of years, which they might donate to us if we had a new centre. So that there'll be lots of other material coming in too. I'll shut up now.
Patsy?
Thank you. I just have two questions to ask, and I actually am in favour of option one as well, because I think it would be good to have a really good archive centre for Dumfries and Galloway, because it will be for the whole region. What I'm asking though, we had a thing at scrutiny the other day, and we were looking at the Burns statue project, and what came out of that was the fact that they hadn't had procurement in and contract managers in from the very beginning, and so things went slightly awry, and we've had one or two issues like that brought to us at Brown Hall School's another one. And what the scrutiny committee came to the conclusion was that on all projects, the procurement team should be in at the start and not brought in when there are problems. And I would just like to have reassurance that that is at the top of your way of managing this, because this is a lot of money, and it's the type of project, because who knows what you'll find when you start doing all these things, that could go off rail a wee bit, and we need to be prepared to deal with that and have it checked regularly. And the other thing is, which I have concerns about, is that on page 20 it says that a cafe is part of the remit, and part of also one of the jobs of this project is to revitalise the town centres. Well, I'm not sure that we would be doing that if we put in a full-blown cafe that serves up lunches and all the rest of it. I don't have any problem with there being a coffee machine in the corner where people can sit and have a cup of coffee and go through things they want to. But I wouldn't like to think that we were going to go into competition with cafes in the town, because I think they've got a big enough job as it is. And I wonder if the HLF funding is the reason for that being in there, or I mean, I know that comes up in everything that, we've got it, Moat Bray planning next tomorrow. We have it for the art gallery in Kakubri. There's always got to be a cafe, and I just wonder how big a cafe has to be.
Richard or Paddy, which one?
I'll deal with the procurement issue first. Certainly, absolutely, fully agree that procurement and sound, robust project management is absolutely essential, and in fact, has been previously reported to members, Dumfries and Galloway is one of the HLF priority status areas in Scotland. Now, whilst that doesn't necessarily ensure additional funding, it certainly sends a very strong commitment, and as part of that ongoing partnership and discussion, it's something that HLF absolutely put down as an essential part of any project proposal. So just to assure members, certainly robust project management and procurement processes will be absolutely in place right from the start. In terms of the cafe provision, it's not in this instance at the moment as an HLF criteria. However, what we are intending to do or proposing to do is that cafe provision would be in proportion to what we're offering. As Graham will outline, very often you get families or visitors coming in perhaps to do family history or genealogy, and what they need is somewhere they can just grab a cup of coffee and then continue with their research or study. So we're certainly not talking about a full-blown cafe as things stand, simply some form of refreshment opportunity. That's all we're looking at.
Okay. I think it's Stephen Thompson next.
Thanks again, Chair. Yeah, so the question is actually about the HLF eligibility. It's raised as a concern in each of the options, and I was just wondering what are the scenarios where that would actually add to potential risk in terms of the calculating the sort of cost of the actual project. And similarly, on Appendix 4, even though there was a bit of narrative there about the 50k potential options for reducing the 100,000 a year revenue after the first few years, what we're being presented with is that those are the costs. So even though there's possibilities, obviously, that's what we're actually committing to, if you like, despite what options may become available in the future as yet to be decided. So it's really just about the HLF eligibility and if there's any risk associated with that.
I take it the HLF eligibility is the question mark we've got in appendix, let's see, in appendix 2. Is that on page?
It's relating to the contribution in kind in terms of staff, and it's whether or not that would be accepted or eligible.
Yes. Well, we haven't factored that in. That at the moment we're assuming we won't get that, as it's not a cost reduction. That would be a cost reduction if we got it. But what we're hoping is that they will accept basically some of my time, even though I won't be project managing. I'll be acting, certainly helping with the project if we get through stage 1 of the project. And it's that cost that we're really hoping to get taken into account by HLF. And we've asked them the question, and at the moment they've gone away to think about whether it's eligible, as you say, as part of the project management costs, or whether the council need to bear that as part of my job. But if we get the money, it would be, if you like, an extra bonus rather than something we're assuming we won't get it, in other words, in the figures, but I'm hoping we will. The other side of it, the ongoing revenue costs. Yeah, as you say, we've put the costs in there to start with. Maybe we should have done it the other way around. But I think we shouldn't go into this with rose-tinted spectacles. If we're saying that's the worst case option, then and then we can look at improving that situation. I think we will definitely improve that situation by quite a long way. But I think it's fair to put the maximum cost into the figures now. And so, as you say, you know what you're letting yourselves in for.
Richard, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment, if I may. I mean, I think Graham's exactly right in terms of the position that we've taken thus far in being prudent with the calculations. Members have been presented with draft specification and indicative plans at this stage. Our experience of working with HLF on other projects just now, and some of the members are well versed with that, would suggest to us that there will be ongoing dialogue and discussion with HLF as this project develops and hopefully evolves with their support. So there will be a further opportunity, I think, and a requirement for us to come back to members throughout the process as the sort of the figures slightly change. But I think at this stage we're absolutely right to pitch them where we have, Chair.
Thank you. Take Archie then, John Martin.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm pleased to hear other members were looking at option 1. But it was something that Councillor Maitland said earlier on that I was quite concerned about. But Richard actually answered the question there, so I'm quite happy with that response. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Councillor Martin, can we move on to Alistair Geddes, then George Prentice.
Well, thanks, Chair. Let me get back to the issue of the facilities and option. Let me say for the start, option 1 is the only sensible alternative. We should be aspiring to quality and value for money in this project, and I think that option 1 is the one that meets these criteria. But I would have to take issue with Mr. Hayes' comment. You know, if I understood him correctly, or more importantly, sir, if I heard him correctly, about it wasn't the intention to have a full-blown cafe in the premises. My response to that would be, why not? Because at the end of the day, for those of us, I never go to Carlisle, and I go to Carlisle quite often, but I never go to Carlisle but what I go to Tully House. And you have good quality eating facilities in Tully House, which add, as far as I'm concerned, very much to the overall experience of visiting the premises. Indeed, I would go back to what we're doing and what Horn Project at the moment, and looking at Councillor Nicholl in particular. We're now restructuring that We're now revamping, at the end of the day, the eating facilities in the Trust building. Not to finish up, Chair, I hasten to add, with a restaurant to which the Trust is added on as an appendage, any more than we would be suggesting, in fact, that that's what we're doing here. You know, provided the full-blown cafe is ancillary to the bigger project and to the experience that's been provided, as far as I'm concerned, it would be remiss of us not, in fact, to go down that particular route. As I've said earlier, option one, as far as I'm concerned, is all about a quality experience and value for money. And I would hope that when we come to the decision at the appropriate time, that we keep that very much to the forefront and that we do make it, you know, not a coffee machine in the corner. We do make it facilities which add value to the project. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. No, just to pick up on Councillor Geddes' point, certainly what I was trying to suggest was that any cafe provision that's developed as part of this is in proportion to the facilities that we are providing. And I think the key will be that it's sustainable and viable, and it meets demand, not only retains people in the facility, but you know, as part of the overall package. And what I was trying to point out, that HLF aren't at this stage saying that a cafe is an essential part of it, but it's something that we're looking at as part of the wider mix, and that will be included as part of the proposals as we take forward.
Councillor Geddes, happy with that? Yep. Councillor Pinnett.
Thanks, Chair. As someone who has been interested for a number of years in family history and genealogy, and someone who uses the website Scotland's People, I was curious to hear the guys saying that they get a lot of people coming in to research their family history. I mean, why would they do that when they can go onto Scottish Government websites and find out more or less everything about their family history, their genealogy and all the rest of it? What are the advantages? I mean, my family came from Ayrshire and Lanarkshire. I don't have to go up to Ayrshire and Lanarkshire to find out exactly who they were and where they came from. I'm just curious to know what advantages there are in coming actually onto the premises.
You're right that family history's changed a lot in the last few years. Doing your research is completely different now because you can go onto Scotland's People, as you say. But people come to us now for completely different reasons. They come to us because they found out, as you say, the birth dates, the relatives. They found out about the where they come from. What they want to know now is more in depth about their life. They want to know about the jobs they did, what they were like, what the conditions they were living in, what other records they might appear in. We've got the Scotland's People is like the tip of the iceberg. It's about 5% of what you could find out about somebody, and they can appear in council minutes, they can appear in Kirk Session records, they can appear in all sorts of other places that you can't necessarily access through Scotland's People. But also as part of this project, what we're hoping to do, and I think it's probably going to happen, is that we will have a Scotland's People Centre in the new Archive and Local Studies Centre. And the purpose of that is when you go to Edinburgh to look up your family history now, you can pay £15 a day and do all the research you want to. Now, as you probably know, if you use Scotland's People a lot, it gets very expensive when you keep adding up your hits, and each time you do it, it adds a bit more money on. You can do an awful lot of work at £15 in a day, and the National Archives, together with the Registrar General, which is now the National Records of Scotland, have got a scheme where repositories, places like us, that they approve of, will get the chance to have their own terminal, which they pay fairly nominal fee for, and then they can charge £15 a day for anybody who's wanting to come in and do the research. And we also have a professional researcher who can help them, and that is really valued, because a lot of people can understand some of the basics of the information, but want a lot more explained to them. So for all those variety of reasons, yes.
George, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to come back for a second, Chair, I quite understand what's being said, but once you start to dig deeper into the genealogy and the background of some of your relations, you're actually maybe better just to forget about it.
Speak for yourself, pal. Archie Dryburgh.
Thanks, Chair. I think when you talk about genealogy and digging into the history, well, you know, cemeteries and all that come to mind here. Like, oh, no. Just a quick question. I'm sure you said it the last time when you were here with the report about the discussions with the Education Department and the opportunities for schools and that to visit and making sure that we have a first-class facility for the education of our young people. Can you give us an idea as to what discussions that you're actually having at the moment with the Education Department?
Yeah, we've been discussing, in particular, our liaison person, if you like, is the Curriculum Development Officer, who's been excellent, Leslie Sloan. She's been really helpful to us in this project, and she has provided, she helped us a lot with the engagements with schools that we did a year or so ago to develop the application form, and also recently we've been talking to the lottery again about links with education. They're very excited about the Learning Town project in Dumfries, and they see that as one of the main benefits of us linking with that. It'll be simultaneous. It will work at the same time, and they see that as one of the real benefits. So what Leslie's been doing, and I've been working with her and a couple of others, is devising ways that the schools and children separately from out with school can link in to archives. And there's loads of ways they can do that we can't do at the moment. One of the obvious ones is on the facility side. If we have an education room that they can come and look at the material, work with it, have creative stuff going on as well. There's all sorts of things. That's where the education officer that would be appointed as part of this project would help. So that's just one example. But yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to Finlay Carson and then move on to the recommendation?
Thanks, Chair. Just very brief. I'm not lost in the fact that we need something like this in Dumfries as the regional capital, but I'd like some assurances that you're going to take forward other facilities within Dumfries and Galloway, for example, Castle Douglas Library or some of the facilities in Kirkcudbright, so that they can be developed to provide portals, if you like, for access to the digital information, because they've got a role to play in archives as well. And the argument that people like to come to where the archives are stored, there's equally an argument that people used to like to go to the factory unit at Abercrombie Road to sit down with the burial clerk and go through records. So whether they're in Dumfries or in a shed in Castle Douglas, people like to visit close to where these archives might be. And, you know, for example, the likes of the library in Castle Douglas would be an ideal place for a portal or a remote access for some of these digital archives. And I'd like some assurance that you are looking at elsewhere in the region where these archives can be accessed.
Yeah, this Dumfries project, sits within a strategy for the region, which we put to Policy and Resources in 2011, which allows for a hub and spokes approach, which I've probably mentioned before, hub and spokes approach to looking at archives, with the main hub in Dumfries, but spokes which could easily be physical spokes. As you say, I don't want people to have to travel from Stranraer to look at records in Dumfries. I'd like their records to be in Stranraer. And if we can put Stranraer Library is a good example, where we might be able to get something in there that has proper storage and staff supervision, allowing for the use of archives. That would be just great. And Castle Douglas, Kirkcudbright, why not something there as well? There already is the Stewardship Museum, which has got a large body of archives in there. We just need to improve that facility in time to come. But the other side of the spokes argument is the more we digitise, the better the provision will be for everybody anyway. And you'll be able to access that on your home computer. So there's two ways to go at it. But I quite appreciate, there's nothing like seeing the original archive. And that's what gets people excited. So yeah, I do appreciate that.
Okay, I'll allow three more and then we're definitely moving on. I'll take Jack Groom, then Gail McGregor, then John Martin, and that's it. We're moving on to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. Going to George there. I know that looking at family histories and family trees, George actually found one of my ancestors' graves in Parton Cemetery. I think he's looking after it for me as we speak. Paid him. I would agree with Councillor Geddes, I think that option 1 is the only option that we should be taking today. And I think, as we said about cafes and spaces, we've got to make this the place for people to visit for this type of information in Dumfries and Galloway. It's got to be Rolls-Royce service. And I know that anyone has been in at the Archive Centre who's been in at the records, or even been up to Forest to look at the records that are there, that are on the shelves. You've got solicitors' records going back hundreds of years. Now, these will all have to be put in here. Option 1.
I'm sorry. 2 very brief questions. Do we own the site that the Lorburn Church site's on? We completely own that. Okay, that's the first one. On the back of Councillor Geddes, Councillor Prentice's questions, are we intending in the future to look towards charging per day for access to genealogy and archives, or are we going to offer it as a free service when it would appear that the rest of Scotland actually charge for the service? Because if it is an income generator, then I don't see why in the future we wouldn't be considering charging £10 a day to get assistance to access these records, as I say, if other people are.
I pressed the wrong button, sorry. Yeah, on the Lorburn Church, as I say, that is owned by the council. It was purchased in 1990. On the income generation side, charging for the service, without exception, if you want to look at archives in Scottish, either in local authorities or through the National Archives, that is a free service. But if you want to do family history research, it can cost. And this is where we're going. As I say, we already employ 10 hours a week a professional researcher who charges people, and a lot of people want to go down that route rather than try and do the research themselves for free, because it's easier and they learn a lot more. There's a mechanism in place, but as I say, that could be improved and there could be a lot more income generated, I think.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one there, as I say. George says about Scotland's people, like I says, well, I might have been one of the unlucky ones. I couldn't even get started in Scotland's people because seemingly somebody had a bonfire when they had the amalgamation of Dumfries and Maxilton, and most of the Maxilton papers were, records were burnt. So just there, coming there, as I say, I've got to agree, I think option 1 is the only way to go. Plus what Alistair says, like the cafe, I think that's an income source as long as it's run properly. But I've just got to ask here, this is all dependent on the Heritage Lottery funding. Where do we go for here if we're unsuccessful in the bid for lottery funding?
If we're unsuccessful in the bid, well, first of all, on Maxilton, we do have some records from Maxilton Borough in the archives. Not in Scotland's people, no. You've got to come to the archives for that. So do come and see us. And on the second point, if we don't get lottery funding, we have to seriously think again, because nobody else will give that sort of level of match funding that we're aware of, and we've had a pretty good look. So it would have to be a very much slimmed down project, which would not do what we want it to do. So the lottery is crucial, as far as I see.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Can we move on to the recommendations? One thing I'd like to say when we move to the recommendations, I mean, this archive centre has a longer gestation period than a entire herd of elephants. I can remember sitting here as the chairman of the Education Committee in 1990 when we purchased that church for the very reason to provide an archive centre for Dumfries. And 25 years later, we're still yapping on about it, so let's move on and get something done. I think going round the table, majority of folks seem to be in favour of option 1. Is there anybody else otherwise minded? No, move on. Sorry, Councillor Maitland.
The recommendations, Chairman, don't require me to be actually in favour of anything. I reserve my opinion. I've said that from the very start. I'm simply noting that there is going to be an application made. I don't say yay or nay at this point.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that we're asked in recommendation 2.1 to consider the options. I'm happy to move as chair. We go for option 1. Anybody otherwise minded?
Second that.
Okay, Councillor Maitland.
In which case then, I will ask for my dissent to be recorded. I don't want to go for any option at all.
You can't have your dissent recorded unless you've actually moved something substantive.
That we don't go for option 1 then.
Right, so you're moving, we don't go for option 1. Okay, is there a seconder to that? You may record your dissent now if you so wish. That will be recorded. Thank you. Moving on to item 2.2, that's for noting, and item 2.3 is for noting. Thank you. Move on to item 4. Which is the Commonwealth Youth Summit 2014. I think members will recall that we hosted the Commonwealth Youth Summit in June of this year. We welcomed 248 participants from across the Commonwealth. The event was organised by Community Learning Development Service in conjunction with a range of volunteers and partners, and it's received a lot of national recognition and also helped to raise the profile of our region. The report gives members more detail on the activities undertaken, the feedback from participants and the impact. We've got Mark Malloy, the event manager, and Kirsty Peden here to answer any questions that members may wish to ask. Do members have any questions? Councillor Dryburgh?
No so much a question, Chair, but I think a big well done to everybody who actually was involved in the Commonwealth Youth Summit. I think it put Dumfries and Galloway on the map with regards what happened with youth prior to the Commonwealth Games. And in that respect, I just want to pass on my congratulations to everyone that was involved in that.
Okay, any other questions for Mark or Kirsty? Do you wish to add anything to your report, either two years?
No, Chair. I appreciate the thanks that's been passed, and I'll pass that on to the many volunteers and staff who were involved in the event itself.
I think you've got a couple of items there that you maybe want to leave for the end of the meeting, do you?
Chair, we do have a photo storyboard and a framed print that the Duke of Edinburgh Awards Scotland have presented, or would like us to present on their behalf to Chair of the committee for to show the support that Dumfries and Galloway Council gave in terms of hosting the event.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, and well, it's to be congratulated and welcomed the report and indeed the outcomes from the summit. It's the outcomes that we really got to address in terms of youth activity. And I well remember a similar event taking place in Stranraer, up in the Dixhill Resource Centre, from people that came from some of the African continent, the countries in Africa. And it was regarded that the jewel in the crown at the time was Agnew Park. And indeed, what we learned from the visitors then was that rather than doing a huge thing, it was taken street by street and having activity street by street, which we've never really achieved. So it's really what it leaves us and the heritage of how we move forward, so that youths do feel that they are being listened to and that we are responding accordingly. And many of the youths, particularly in Stranraer, see that they've got a skateboard park that's quite dangerous in terms of its use and the state of it. And it's how we move forward. We recognise the youths, but we also...
With all due respect, Councillor, we're here to talk about the Commonwealth, not the parochial issues in Stranraer.
Not the parochial issues.
So if you want to address yourself to the report, do so. I don't wish to hear about your skateboard park in Stranraer. You've got that on the agenda, do it for the future meeting.
Chair, if you don't mind me coming back on that one, I'm not talking about the parochial, I'm talking about when we have the youth, the Commonwealth and the summit and everything, that we follow on through to, you know, the heritage, what we are left with, and it's so that the youths feel that it has been worthwhile. That's my point, not just in terms of a parochial issue. It's so that the youths throughout Dumfries and Galloway can feel that yes, that this has been worthwhile, as indeed it has been, and that they feel that their voices are continually listened to.
Thanks, Councillor. I think you'll see from the report that one of the legacies of the event is using Yammer, which is an online tool that was provided through Microsoft as a sort of in-kind contribution to the Commonwealth and to the legacy of this. Young people are therefore already communicating using that and exchanging ideas and views of what happens in their own communities or in their own countries. I think in the report itself, we've also got examples of young men and women who have taken from that experience and actively gone to seek further volunteering opportunities, whether it's in the Girls Brigade, whether it's in their local youth groups, or whether it's just to try and get another section of their Duke of Edinburgh award. We've also had some really good feedback from youth workers, and that wasn't a direct impact that we were looking to have, but I think it's been a real boost in the youth work arena, if you like, in terms of this is something that we can achieve, that we can deliver, that we can exchange ideas across Scotland and across the Commonwealth and across countries where youth work perhaps is not as predominantly supported or funded as what it is here in Scotland, and to see what other young people in countries are doing in their own areas through voluntary effort can be really inspiring, and I think that has probably had a big effect on lots of our young people and our youth workers in our area. I think the long-term impacts we've yet to see. Young people are already saying they want to return to Scotland, that the welcome they got here, particularly in Dumfries and Galloway, and the happy smiles is how they described it, of our staff and volunteers. I think we've yet to see what the impacts will be when we have return visits, return exchanges. We had many host families from across Dumfries and Galloway who are still in communication with the young people that they looked after and had living with them for the week post the summit. I think there'll be impacts from that. And just cross exchanges between local youth groups and whether it's Ghana or what other countries that we keep communication with. I think it'll be probably quite long lasting and something we'll want to keep an eye on as the time progresses.
Say, Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's just a quick question here. This was mainly run by volunteers. I know there's a lot of work put in for council officers, but the volunteers some went way and above beyond, but we got really wet and were flooded and things like that and took folk in. We're asked to note at 2.2 the contribution. I think somebody's got a contribution made by local volunteers in that. Can I ask, have they been personally thanked?
I think you're right, Councillor Ferguson, in terms of that we couldn't have delivered this without the volunteers that were an integral part of it, and I'm pleased today that some of the staff and youth workers are able to come along and hear your comments that particularly worked with the volunteers and supporting them. After the summit, a few weeks after it, all the volunteers were invited to a recognition event that the Provost of Dumfries, Councillor Thompson, attended and presented the volunteers with certificates in recognition. And the other key part for us was we had a lot of young volunteers that are maybe looking for employment, and a big sell for this was that for the young people who volunteered, that would be guaranteed references for, if they were going for future jobs or, going on to study, and also, were able to get support by other CLD staff around building their personal profiles. And they were all thanked for that. And I know that the feedback we got from the volunteers felt that that the recognition, and they were extremely well, supported by the staff and thanked. And I think that's common in terms of the wider legacy work within the authority, in terms of making sure that all legacy projects are, recognising the work of the volunteers, whether that be with the Queen's Baton Relay or with the Commonwealth Youth Summit.
Thanks. It was a kind of rhetoric question, Mark, because I knew about the event that Ted hosted, and I'm actually just wondering if there's a way we can incorporate that into the recommendations, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just really, I think it's great that we're able to recognise the input of everybody involved in making this event a great success, and it's testament to the work all the volunteers and people engaged with it. One of the things, though, was in 3.7 of the report, it does mention obviously working together. The project management issues meant that you had to work together and take a creative approach to overcome barriers. And I'm just thinking, in terms of learning points for future events in the region, what sort of barriers did you encounter, and how do you think they could be sort of ameliorated in the future?
Thanks, Councillor. Well, it probably was an event, although the team that were leading on this were very experienced in planning events with young people and involving young people in them. The scale of two sites, one being a campsite that had to be created and the other being DG1, and just the whole logistical arrangements of creating a campsite in the Dock Park whilst we wanted to really showcase the park and the amount of investment we'd made in the park, and the ideal location it was to have a sort of jamboree style accommodation for young people, it was also logistically quite challenging in terms of making sure that the facilities were adequate and that it wasn't a sort of poor version of accommodation that we were providing. So logistically that was a fair challenge. Obviously we had to communicate with many different departments within the council, and just getting that understanding of what young people's needs were, the different cultural needs that we needed to accommodate, the scale, 200, in excess of 200 young people in the park. I'll be honest, not everybody always has the most positive perception of youth type events, so we'll maybe always have to kind of sell that this is something that's really positive, that young people are really positive role models in the community, and that it's not just going to be something negative. So those were the types of challenges that we overcame. But working with colleagues like DG First, both on the catering side and on the sort of parks side, then I think we've probably managed to do really well in the circumstances and in the timescale that we had to do it.
Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to echo the thanks and congratulations for holding this. And I think you do yourself and maybe the young people an injustice by suggesting that you have that there's maybe a negative thought about young people, because certainly with the likes of Youth Beat, there's nationally it's recognised as a great success, and I think the Commonwealth Youth Summit, you can go as far as say it's been internationally recognised. I've got two questions. What's next on the horizon for young folk? And also, maybe a slightly more difficult one, are you it's the youth, the Nithsdale guys that are organising all these things. Is there enough being done in the likes of the Stewartry or Wigtonshire to involve young people? Because we hear about all the great projects that are happening in Dumfries, but there seems to be a deficit of these sort of activities in the likes of the Stewartry.
That button on. What's next? Well, interestingly, you raised that, Councillor. In the sort of forums where Mark particularly attends in terms of youth work managers from across Scotland coming together, then this event has been recognised. I think because not only the young people who came, but the staff from other local authorities accompanied their young people, and the staff left as buoyed up, if you like, as some of the young people did, in saying, why can't we do more of this? Why can't we exchange ideas and bring young people together from across the country and across the Commonwealth? So youth work managers are talking about, could we do something similar? 2018 is the Scottish recognised Year of Young People. Whether that may produce something or some requests, I think is quite possible. Not sure whether the staff team could take it, if I'm honest, if it comes too early. But yeah, we'd be definitely up for it, because I think it was such a success that we could probably do even better next time. In terms of what's happening across the region, there is just probably there is building a real experience amongst young people who are involved within the Nithsdale team in terms of their experience and ability around planning events. They've got skills around sound, lighting, the health and safety requirements that will go along with events like this, the logistical, and that's been fundamental to any sort of event that runs. It's not just about the day itself, it's about the young people being involved in the promotion, the publicity, the choosing of acts, how that actually happens, the funding of it, the fundraising of it. I have to say they do a fair bit of work there as well. How we spread that out is a challenge in terms of where we try and bring young people from other areas in and be involved. And in terms of the summit itself, other modern apprentices, for example, from the Stewartry were involved in the staff and volunteer team that happened. Similarly from Annandale and Eskdale, and staff from Wigton were also part of the group. So we are trying to, particularly with the modern apprentices and younger, newer staff coming in, involve them in the planning of these events so that they then have also the skills they can share in their own communities with their own youth groups, whether they be voluntary or paid.
Thanks, Chair. You want me to expand on the question that Councillor Carson asked about what else is happening throughout Dumfries and Galloway. We're scheduled to bring a report back to this committee on the outcomes of our CLD service review. And we're just at the stage of looking at benchmarking, best practice, comparator information from not just across Dumfries and Galloway, but also across Scotland. And what I think we've given a commitment previously to do is where there is good practice happening, how can we replicate that in a sustainable way. So that is one of the key outcomes of our service review, and Mark meets regularly along with other principal officers from across the region to share ideas and to try and do joint planning and joint work planning, etc. as well.
So just a quick one, Chair, and just to add to Harry's comments, I mean, given the comments of Councillor Scobie and Councillor Carson regarding current activities for young people across other parts of the region, perhaps that's something that we can pick up in terms of the narrative in the next CCS performance reports at area level. I'm sure Harry and the team would be pleased to do that.
Just got one question. It's not to pour ice on anything at all. It's just how much did it cost? Did you get money from the Commonwealth because of the Commonwealth Games and things, or did Dumfries and Galloway have to host this and therefore pay for it? And just wondering how it worked with that regard.
The team were successful in attracting 10,000 from the lottery in relation to the legacy fund that they had, which was the maximum amount within that category, if you like, which was a great contribution. The Hollywood Trust also came in around 14,000 and were a good partner to have involved. This committee, or Policy and Resources, set aside service reserves when we agreed to act as the host, and the budget was covered within Community and Customer Services.
Can we, just before we move on to the recommendation, I must pick up on one point that Finlay made, and that was about youth beats. And we hope now that he's the chairman of the Stewart Area Committee, he'll make sure that the Stewart Area Committee make a financial contribution to youth beats. However, I wasn't trying to be parochial there, but anyway, moving on to the recommendations.
Perhaps, Chair, you should have made that a condition of his appointment.
The appointment had nothing to do with me. That was a decision of the full council, I will remind you. The full council appointed Councillor Carson, not me personally. Thank you very much. I don't recall you recording your dissent either, Mrs. Maitland. Anyway, can we move on to the recommendations? And we've already dealt with 2.1. Now, 2.2, I quite agree with Councillor Ferguson. I think we should have it recorded in the minutes. Thanks to all the staff and volunteers who made this such a success, and particularly the young people. And if there are things spinning off this, hopefully this committee will be kept updated in any future progress between our young folk and the folk in the Commonwealth. I'll give you the last word, Alistair.
Thanks very much, Chair. Can I also suggest, or no for the first time, that we should put in the word approve. Note and approve. That it will, bearing in mind what we've discussed earlier today, ultimately be part of the visual archive of this authority. And I think it's right and proper that, for posterity, we record the fact that we just didn't note it, we approved it.
Item 5, which is the benchmarking information for leisure and cultural services. And can I just bring Richard in this one to begin with?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The information that's presented to members today builds on the request from yourselves following the CCS committee on the 16th of July, when you were presented with benchmarking data as part of the activity-based budgeting information and report. We were, I think, both in terms of members and officers, we were like-minded on the basis that the level of benchmarking data in terms of the local government benchmarking framework and the SIPFA results in isolation did not present for us enough detailed data in order to benchmark our services and evidence to you as members the performance of those services adequately. So since that date, there's been a significant amount of work undertaken by my colleagues, and it's really proving to bring out some quite intriguing results. It's very much a work in progress, members, and you'll hear from my colleagues Scott Grant, Ollie Driver and Colin Freeman today, specifically in regard to the three areas that they're looking at. But certainly what I would like to see, members, with your approval, is that this is a first of a number of reports that will provide you and indeed ourselves as officers with information that will help us to make more informed decisions in terms of our services to make them the most efficient, effective and economic way that they possibly can be. So work in progress. I think it's a good start. Hopefully members will appreciate the level of detail that's been provided. We look forward to your questions, but with your blessing, Chair, perhaps I could just ask my three colleagues just to briefly summarise their three separate appendices to the report.
Carry on, Colin, do you want to start?
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm just going to update members very quickly on the appendices A to D with regards to leisure and sport facilities. And as Richard has already outlined, this was quite a challenging project for us in terms of putting some meaningful information together for members. Appendix 1A provides a revised data statement on the local government benchmarking framework data, and our council has been put in with our family group members for a like-for-like comparison. The second bottom row, which is highlighted in yellow as far as Dumfries and Galloway is concerned, is the actual return that we submitted, which resulted in us coming 30th out of 32. The bottom row highlights the Dumfries and Galloway's revised figures, which takes into account a number of changes which we believed allowed us to compete on a like-for-like basis. What I should stress is that Appendix 1 does not take into account how many of the facilities that the Council chooses to operate, the way in which we operate, whether it's the Leisure and Trust or whether it's a community managed facility. And it also doesn't take into any consideration that there are significant variances in terms of the cost to operate swimming pools or ice sports facilities as opposed to traditional sports halls. So each of these items makes it very difficult to compare a like-for-like. So effectively what we've done is within the LFR return as it currently stands, there have been a number of additional costs that have been included that we believe shouldn't have been, such as the CCS strategic management costs. So it's so for managers that don't have a direct input or influence on leisure and sport, we're also submitted as part of that cost. It's all part of the financial returns that are put together by finance colleagues. There are a number of elements that are also wrongly apportioned to that return, and we are currently working to try and make sure that that doesn't happen in future years. As you can see, the revision, the revised bottom line gives us an amended total, an amended cost per head, which increases our positional statement within the 32 local authorities to 27th. So I guess with all the facilities that are listed in that particular family group, there's only one other than ourselves that is not a trust or a community managed facility, which is Aileen Sarr, and that is probably our most direct comparison. Appendix 1B provides revised SIPFA data within our council's family group, which is a slightly different group. Again, in terms of a highlight, we should note that the cost per attendance at facilities in Dumfries and Galloway is £3.15 per visit, which is below the Scottish national average of £3.50. This ranks us 13th out of 32, and Dumfries and Galloway cost per attendance at indoor facilities is £2.15, which is also below the Scottish average of £2.21, which is 14 out of 32. Excuse me. So in terms of the Appendix 1B, which is the Chartered Institute Professional Finance Associates, again, we've done exactly the same with our 7 comparator authorities. We have submitted on the second bottom row, which is our submission to SIPFA, which shows us an overall 12th in Scotland, and the revised figure, which is the bottom line, which shows us 6th in Scotland, which is effectively deducting the NNDR. Appendix 1C provides a bit more of a meaningful comparison. This is basically it's a comparison on a site-by-site basis for our larger facilities. We've tried to identify those facilities that have similar types of large-scale swimming pools, multi-purpose leisure facilities such as sports halls, etc. It should be noted that it costs roughly 5% more to operate, but yields 30% less income once the NNDR are removed. Now, this is an important factor, that it's not just about trying to recover that by increasing fees and charges. It's just that the models that other authorities or other local trusts implement means that they either have lower membership rates, in which case they're dealing on volume, and it's not a case of us just putting up our fees and charges, because that could have an adverse effect on attendances. And Appendix 1D effectively is exactly the same, but looking at our smaller like-for-like facilities, showing the net cost per attendance, which is there or thereabouts with our comparator authorities. So in terms of moving forward, we accept there still needs to be a lot of dialogue, there still needs to be a lot of discussion with local authorities. Trying to get a breakdown of exactly where their figures come from has proved extremely challenging. It has been recognised by officers that through these conversations that there hasn't been like-for-like reporting, and that there have been elements that have been included in some authorities and excluded from others. So effectively what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with something that we believe we can present to members other than our 6 monthly performance reports and our annual performance reports that has some meaning and some substance. So based on that, we have officers that sit on best practice forums. So we're looking at benchmarking across the board and best practice. We're looking at Highland Life, which has a very successful budget type membership scheme for their fitness provision. We set up internal quality assessments using the Quest Quality Framework, and we continue to work with internal officers and external local authorities to try and identify how certain authorities are performing the way that they do, interrogating their figures to determine whether their submissions are accurate or not, and effectively ultimately what we want to aim for is to have something that we have confidence in, that we can come back to members and say, this is how we are performing. In terms of our 6 monthly performance reports, they compare like for like on a month-by-month basis, which obviously we present to members on a regular basis.
Thank you. I think before we move on, it'd be easier if we take one section at a time. So if there's any questions in Scott's report, Alistair.
I agree entirely with what you're suggesting, sir. I do have a question, and it's in the back of what Scott has just said. If you go to Appendix 1B, Chair, and you look, for instance, at the quite staggering statistic, for the cost per attendance in the borders of 0.24 pence, not surprisingly, that gives them the national ranking of first. Now, as far as I'm concerned, without being disrespectful to a neighbouring authority, that is sus, if I can use the colloquialism. And I think that, if these exercises, are to mean anything in future, the interrogation has got to be as robust as possible, and we've got to have information which allows like comparison with like, Chair.
Thanks very much. Anybody else? I'll take Gail first, then Finlay, then Jane.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually more sort of procedural. I didn't receive these papers until yesterday, and I was away all day yesterday and didn't get a chance to read them until this morning. So you might as well be speaking in Chinese as far as I'm concerned at the moment, because I'm really not understanding what we're discussing. They were posted out to me on the 17th. They arrived with me on the 20th. And I genuinely have not had an opportunity to go through these appendixes as I would like to do. So I would very much appreciate if we go really slowly, give us all the chance to get to the right appendix, because I can hear shuffling around me all the time with people trying to keep up. And then maybe I'll actually get the gist of what we're discussing at some point. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Without opening up the can of worms, it's Alios. When we're looking at non-domestic rates, has there been any work done to look at how we could save non-domestic rates by maybe transferring buildings only or whatever into some sort of Alios scheme? Is that something that there could be short-term or savings that we could make on a short time scale? Because I know there's different propositions being worked up for different levels at Alios. Is that something that can be looked at over the next couple of budgeting years, or?
Well, I think we've got to investigate all the options. I'll bring Richard in first, but a wee comment I'd like to make on that after.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just firstly jump back to Councillor Geddes' comment, which is absolutely valid, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do the exercise we're doing. It's been a really intriguing piece of work, talking to the likes of Scottish Borders about what they have included and more notably what they haven't included in terms of their return. In terms of Councillor Carson's comments, Yes, absolutely. We're currently looking as officers at a range of options that we may well present to members as part of budget setting processes moving forward in order to provide you with as much information as possible in terms of the fiscal challenges we have on the horizon. So, and that facilities model is absolutely something that we're looking at just now.
Okay, can I just say there has been a bit of work done elsewhere in Alios, and they're not the be-all and end-all. They actually have a shelf life, which would appear to be 15 years, and then you lose any advantages that may have been built up. So don't look at that as some kind of panacea to cure all your ills and provide the same level of service. Another thing I would point out as well, this not paying of non-domestic rates are pooled centrally and then redistributed to local authorities. So if every local authority in Scotland went for these alios, there could be a consequent loss to the centre of, say, £100 million per annum, which then gets redistributed to local councils. So there'd be no distribution to local councils of that portion of money. So you lose out in two hands. You're not getting that amount of money coming back into the authority from the centre because nobody's paying any rates. So, you know, the notion that alios are somehow a win-win situation, load of nonsense. Speak to people with experience elsewhere and you'll find that. They have a limited shelf life.
Chair, I wasn't opening this up to debate, and that was not my intention, because I'm well aware that there is varying degrees of alios, and we maybe need to get away from the term alio, but all I wanted to know was if we're comparing different councils that don't pay non-domestic rates, it actually has a massive effect. Whether it's the right thing to do or not, that's for another time, but it does make a big difference in these benchmarking figures.
Well, I think that's something, as Richard said, it's work in progress. Our officers, obviously, we want to make proper comparisons, proper benchmarks. You've got to do it with appropriate authorities, and not one that may have a perceived advantage at the minute. I think it's Jane next, and then Stephen.
Thanks. I'd like to ask what IR stands for.
Whereabouts is that?
It is on the total expenditure minus non-domestic rates, capital and IR.
My apologies. I don't recall what that is, but that would. I'll have to come back to members on that one. I do apologise.
Okay, Chairman. The other thing I want to know about is does the income in these facilities, particularly the ones with pools, does it include education income? You know, for swimming income.
The income is obviously is as a result of a number of different factors, education being one of them. Obviously, it's our usual pay and plays and other type facilities and types of activities. So there's a range of income there.
Okay, Stephen and then Andy.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really about income as well, in a sense. I would find it very helpful. I mean, like Gail, I got my papers quite late, so it's been trying to digest quite a lot of information in a very short time. But one of the things about the income is it possible to get that as part of the benchmarking data? Because it would seem to make quite a lot of sense if we're comparing not just what it's costing us per visitor, but also what we're charging per visitor. And I know you can do a simple calculation just based on number of visitors against income, for example, and that'll give you a kind of rough and ready rule of thumb. But it seems we're charging like £1 per visit. So, and it's maybe touching on what Councillor Maitland mentioned there, just about, is that including visits from sort of likes of education? So are we using one set of attendance figures, or are we using a different set of income figures? And it's really just to get that consistent. So that'll be one piece of extra data that I'd welcome. The other thing is just on the benchmarking, obviously, rurality and population density seems to be the sort of key factors for determining the benchmarking in this instance, but I would suspect that the economic differences and the demographics would be a key factor as well in the terms of difference in ages, economic considerations for how we set our charges, for example. I mean, is that reflected in the sets of other local authorities that were benchmarked against?
Thanks, Councillor. You're absolutely right. There's a myriad of complexities within the reporting back on these figures. Just going to your first question, in terms of the price or the cost that we charge for various different activities, Sport Scotland produce a digest annually, which give us an indication on whether we are above or below sort of the national average in terms of charging for individual activities, whether it's a membership, whether it's a badminton court session, or whether it's a main games hall. In terms of the immediate benchmarking, what we've tried to do is take into account rurality and not just look at the comparative authorities that we've been bunched with, but have a look at other authorities that we believe have similar facilities and similar demographics, aging population as we have, etc., etc. So it's not a straight uplift, unfortunately, and that's where we're trying to get to, and we are very much reliant on those other local authorities providing that information to us and for us to interrogate as thoroughly as we possibly can.
Chair, just to come back to Councillor Maitland, I've had a moment. Internal recharges, IR.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So it's just on actually the charging, because it does reference that we're slightly below average in terms of what we charge customers in terms of the national average. But whenever we're looking at the figures, I think it's Appendix 1D, is that right? And if you took the attendances, so then the question would be, well, how many of those attendances are actually charged attendances according to that, because it doesn't actually add up if you do the calculation. So I was just wondering, again, is that an internal recharge situation, and how many of the figures are actual public customers and how many are internal?
I think you're right. I don't know that exact split, but there is a mixture of the two.
Are we able to know that exact split?
Yes, we should be able to get that determination, yeah.
Thanks, Richard, for stealing my thunder, because I'd worked out what IR was as well. It's got. I'm actually looking again at the figures in Appendix 1C. I'm actually wondering if this new thing's actually affecting it. 1C and 1D. And Stephen kind of touched on it here, but we need a column in there that actually gives us an average charge, because it's quite a simple correlation. And it's actually, it's no coincidence that the lower average charge to people then creates the highest net costs. So I've done the quick calculations, and in the 6 on page 1C, for example, the Ryan Centre, the average income is £1.71, and Argyll and Butts is £3.74, DG1's £2.70. I can appreciate there's a huge difference here, Scott, in how this comes across. It would be really helpful for us if we could actually have in there what the averages were, and when you were actually talking about how many are free, right? How many are getting, because the internal recharge for some of the facilities would actually, I would suggest, was really significant. So rather than take them out, we need a column in there with the internal recharges, so that we know that when it comes to budget setting time, that schools are actually setting aside the right amount of budget, for example, recharging for the swimming pools. And if they're not, they should be.
Can I just say that I think we've got a problem here in that we're looking at total attendances, income and expenditure, and then doing the divvy up, right? That doesn't give an indication of how many people are adults, how many are. Some folk have a discount for pensioners, other places have a season ticket. So that's the very point was made right at the start of this exercise. Our officers need to go away and get further information to make the true comparator benchmarks, because this is very much basic work here, and the questions you're raising are actually issues that officers are well aware of, that we're not really comparing like for like, and we may well be getting a skewed figure for some of our facilities, actually. Andy?
Exactly, Chair, and it wasn't meant as a criticism, it was actually meant as a way forward, because
2.4 is actually is the recommendations how to improve this. And if we can get extra things put into the report, it gives us a better idea. So when it comes to budget setting time, it's a meaningful budget we set. And there's a danger that things get hidden, because there will be social work costs in this as well. There'll be other costs that are probably getting met by this department that should be getting met by another department. So we need that full breakdown, and I think this is a really useful first step in the exercise. We need to move on to the next stage.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair, and I would support the comments made by the members. I think what this sort of high-level summary has given us, albeit a high-level summary that's much more relative in terms of the data that we've previously had. What this telling us is, I think, in broad terms on our leisure and sport facilities, is in terms of expenditure compared to other authorities and other facilities of a similar type of operation, we're there or thereabouts. In terms of attendances, some of them are comparable. In terms of income and income generation, we're well below other areas. We need now to go away and look at why that is and how we present that information and make sure we're comparing on a like-for-like basis. And that's what I referred to right at the start. We'd welcome the opportunity to now keep this dialogue with members going and bring back much more detailed information for your information.
Thanks, Chair. It's all very well bringing us the revised figures, which shows where we maybe should be if we had different methods of calculating it. But the bottom line is the unrevised figures are where we actually are, and that's what it's costing us to put people through these services. So you're raising hopes with the revised figures, but it's not. In other areas, they are charging, that's what it's costing them. Whereas in our area, the revised figure is not what it's costing us, it is the unrevised figure that's not what it's costing us. So it is, we're trying to create an untrue picture, maybe, if you like, but you're giving us an indication of where we maybe could be. Is that a fair assumption?
That is a fair assumption. However, again, it goes back to, in terms of even if I go back slightly further with regards to the attendance figures that we submitted following the PricewaterhouseCoopers revised methods of collecting data, then that's obviously had an impact on our number of attendances, which has an impact on the cost per head. We have identified within the LFR return, which is in Appendix 1B, that there are costs that have been associated with the leisure and sport facilities return that shouldn't be in it. So these are things that can be easily stripped out, that doesn't give us a false reading. For example, we have certain service managers that are getting charged against leisure and sport facilities, which shouldn't be charged against leisure and sport facilities. So again, this exercise has allowed us to interrogate that a lot further and has been able to identify where there has been some fundamental, I wouldn't suggest errors, but miscodings, if you like, or misgivings that we hope to address. And that's, as Richard's already pointed out, that's where we hope to be in the future.
Yeah, Chair, a number of points have been touched on, but could I maybe add to it without running the risk of being accused of being parochial? I'm looking at these issues here, and it's really whether indeed, for this to mean anything to us, whether indeed it has been benchmarked against our anti-poverty strategy. The reason I say that is if I look at some of the areas within Dumfries and Galloway, for instance, the Ryan Centre, DG1, and then the Merrick, and we look at, again, the cost, the net cost per attendance, or indeed the gross, and we look at the differences within Dumfries and Galloway from the Merrick costing some £4.60 down to DG1 at £3.49. And indeed, I well remember the council running free sessions for swimming, for instance. And indeed, that would put up the attendance, but would then give you a different figure against the cost per attendance. And it's against that whether indeed we can draw anything from it in terms of our anti-poverty strategy. Because if we take a family living in the South Mackers, then it's costing a lot more per attendance at £4 odd against DG1 in Dumfries and again still a variance in the RINS area. And then we look at that indeed, you know, coming back to the anti-poverty strategy, for it to mean anything, again in comparison to the other authorities, whether indeed they do reflect their attendances or their policies on an anti-poverty strategy to allow people who cannot afford some of the visits to the various leisure facilities and cultural facilities, whether indeed that reflects anything in terms of our priority policy as the administration has put forward, and I welcome it, in terms of the anti-poverty strategy, particularly against the news we got last night in terms of 1 in 3 children live in poverty and are affected by it. So that would reflect the family in that respect. So it's to make some use of the figures that are coming before us, and to say, you know, are other authorities using the leisure facilities so that it's not just poverty being gauged against income, but it also is what is available to people in terms of accessing some of our facilities in that respect to some of the areas.
That's the next part of our benchmarking, Willie, is what it's costing the public. Because this is the cost to us per attendee, not what the public are paying. So that's the other benchmark we need. What we are charging the public. We haven't come to that yet. This is what it costs us per attendance. So it doesn't really relate to the poverty element at the moment, if you understand what I'm saying. Andy, do you want to come back in?
Yes, please, Chair. I'm going to ask the officers here if have they've got any indication, or if they can find out for us, in the comparator authorities, what the NHS Health and Wellbeing contribution is towards sport and leisure.
Yeah, we don't know that at this stage, but that's certainly something, along with the charging and the targeted programmes in terms of areas of social deprivation, etc. We can absolutely now get into that level of detail.
Okay, can we move on to the second section, which is Ollie and the Active Schools programme?
In terms of the appendix, it's Appendix 2A and 2B. In relation to active school and community sport, it's an initial challenge to highlight to members is that we are still the only authority that operates with an integrated active school and community sport model. I'll just give you a second to get to the appendix before I continue. Okay. In terms of the appendix that's in front of you, as I started with saying, members, we still operate, we are the only authority that has the integrated structure across active school and community sport. So in terms of an initial challenge of benchmarking, to go to one of the other local authorities or trusts, they did not have the replicant model that we work within. So I wanted to highlight that before you. In terms of Appendix 2A, there's some detail there from the extended family of comparator authorities. Within the report, it highlights a Dumfries and Galloway performance over the academic years of 2012-13, then 13-14, that in terms of 4 areas of comparison, we had the highest percentage increase in terms of the comparators and the authorities who provided that information. Since this report was compiled, a Freedom of Information request went into Sport Scotland. It's now possible to access all 32 authorities' active schools reports, which would allow for an increase and a more robust comparison with additional authorities outside of those that are represented in 2A. It's also worth noting that at this moment in time, Sport Scotland investment to active schools, they don't lead on a authority by authority comparison. There is no benchmarking that's driven by Sport Scotland. Moving on to the Appendix 2B, as an authority, we submit an annual Active Schools Programme return. ASMO, the acronym stands for Active Schools Monitoring Online, and that's a subtotal across the 3 terms in terms of participant sessions, activity sessions, school to club links, and then underpinning the delivery information as to who deliver those sessions. Additionally, the detail that's contained in 2B, the ASMO report, all of that information is also collated within the monthly CCS KPI returns and goes against our physical activity returns, our support to community groups, and that will obviously be represented in our 6-monthly reports that are due in December. In terms of our improvement actions around active school and community sports, we are increasing the work with colleagues in PE around the PE pass agenda, physical education, physical activity and sport. In terms of our distinct deliverers, we believe that we've got a huge opportunity to grow the number of secondary school leaders that could engage within our programmes, not just within a school setting, but also then going out and working with our clubs and community. So acting to support and mentor these young people to take them across that school and community transition. As part of benchmarking moving forward, we are part of a regional sporting partnership with 13 other authorities, which gives us an opportunity to engage with my peers and officers in those councils. But also we work within a national active schools management group. And within the South West, there's now established an active school and sport development management forum where some of the operational detail that doesn't come through in the ASMO report as to the successes behind volunteer recruitment, retention, the development of school club links, gives us an opportunity to explore that with colleagues in other authorities.
Thank you very much, Ollie. Richard, do you want to say something?
Just a quick one, Chair, if I may. Ollie's probably undersold himself a wee bit. The model that we've got in Dumfries and Galloway in terms of school and community links and the integrated model is the model that Sports Scotland are saying to all other authorities, follow Dumfries and Galloway. They've got it right. And the evidence here is the percentage increase in terms of our attendances and the number of sessions that we're delivering across the piece. That's really good. The next bit that we're currently talking to Sports Scotland about, and indeed I'm speaking to Colin Grant, our Director of Education, about, is around that PPAS agenda, as Ollie says, and it's how we can now continue, as we've started to do, to break down those historical barriers, is probably the best way of putting it in terms of PE and sports development and active schools, so that everything comes together. So I think this is an area where we're absolutely leading the way, members, and I'm confident in saying that to you. The work that Ollie's team is doing is fantastic, and we're looking to push on now in terms of breaking down those sort of historical arrangements with PE and education. And I have to say the Director of Education is absolutely on board in terms of those discussions. So I look forward to further progress in that regard and reporting that back to you soon.
Thanks, Richard. Andy?
Thanks very much, Chair. Richard's kind of touching it here a wee bit. We're actually the Scottish leaders in this. There's no doubt about that. And some of the work, for example, at Max High and other places like that is exemplary and being copied throughout Scotland. And I actually think as a committee here, as part of this benchmarking process, we actually need a huge tribute here, because through Richard and Scott to Ollie and his team, because it really is a superb service that's getting delivered here, and that needs to be recognised through this committee.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually on, well, I'm looking at Appendix 2B, just on the school club links, and it was really just to get a bit more detail and understanding over what holiday programme and promo meant in terms of, because I think they feature it 2,000 odd and 3,200-ish in terms of promo, and I'm just wondering, in terms of links, does that mean, how does that incorporate things like participants and deliverers, for example, and given that they're obviously the anomalous figures in that graph? So it's just a wee bit more detail on that. Thank you.
The school club links, it draws reference, as you've mentioned, there's different criteria, and it's actually looking at the support that can come from the community to perhaps, as you've mentioned, the holiday programme provision. So that actually draws reference as well to the promotion of club and community-based sessions We actually draw recognition through this monitoring process for the promotion of, for example, a community cricket programme during an October half term. If we can promote and share that through the Active Schools Network as we do, that actually helps in terms of the figures that are presented in front of you.
Thank you. So in terms of how that adds to the figures that we have in terms of the general increase this year, does that mean it's out with the actual normal curriculum of school activities, so that these sort of promotional events during the holidays, for example, are actually really boosting the figures because that's when people can participate?
To answer that, the Active Schools element of the business is all extracurricular and out with the 9 till 3. And as you say, an element of the work is to take the extracurricular during a term basis, hopefully, as Richard's alluded to, building on what's delivered in PE, the extracurricular provision in place, and then when we have the holiday periods and the opportunity, ensuring that the pathway then is for the young people to go into the clubs. That's the theory behind it, and that's why we do promote in the way that we do. An example being the Sports Academy programme, the working model that we've got A&E, that we're looking to replicate into the other 3 areas. That allows us to take the work that we see in term time and then to ensure that the young people have that opportunity to go into those clubs.
Thanks, James. Again, I want to echo Andrew. Andy, I think your department can't be praised highly enough for the work you've done over the last few years. Certainly one of the concerns that I had as a parent, but also other parents voicing it, was there was no link up between education, PE and extracurricular sport, whether that was rugby or football, with coaches and PE teachers all working from a different rule book and whatever. And that we're working far more closely with that, and I welcome you saying that there's going to be more work done with that, and just the sheer number of kids now getting involved. You also just need to look at the range of sports that are available that wouldn't have been available in the past. One area, again, not being tried to be parochial again, but I had concerns about the handover of sporting facilities or booking of them back to the education department. Is there any concerns there that are going to come up, or have these now been addressed and the numbers are still holding up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that there were some teething issues in terms of the changes that we made there, predominantly, I have to say, driven by the need to identify savings. But that was premised on the basis of our active school and community sport team working much closer, both A, with the school and B, with the clubs, to provide that link between the two. I think that those initial challenges, for the most part, have been overcome. They've been overcome by that closer working relationship, but also with engaging with the community. And now we've got community groups coming to us and saying, well, why can't we have a key? Why can't we have we're quite happy to manage this and support you in developing and enhancing services ourselves, which in terms of the Community Empowerment Bill and the other things that we're keen to work on is absolutely the direction of travel. There will be more detailed information coming back to Stewardship Area Committee. Spoke to colleague Julia Bridson in Education last week in that regard to ensure that we're monitoring those figures so there isn't a dip in attendances. So that will be forthcoming to Stewardship Area Committee soon, but I'm pleased to report that I think most of those initial teething problems have been overcome and there's a good relationship there now.
So thanks very much, Chair, and I have to echo what was being said about the Active Schools programme, especially within Andale and Estill. The uptake there has been phenomenal, thanks to the support not only the school, the Leisure and Sports Department, but other establishments as well. I'm just wondering, Chair, if there's an opportunity here as well, not so much for the benchmarking side of things, but active body, active mind comes to the sort of for and increasing people's health and well-being. I'm just wondering if there's a link here to NHS. And looking at the potential opportunities there for families, all demographics across Dumfries and Galloway to actually get involved in one way or another. Not so much to do with the benchmarking, I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity that maybe Richard can have a look at and see what information is coming from the NHS, or especially on the community health safety, health and social care side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for the past sort of 18 months, 2 years, we've been working much closer with NHS through the Joint Health and Wellbeing team. We're using the data that they're collecting to help us to shape the type of services that Ollie and his team are then delivering and targeting. And the best example most recently is the physical activity survey that was done as a joint piece of work between the Joint Health and Wellbeing Unit and ourselves. So I think that direction of travel has started, but it's something that we can continue to grow and develop, certainly in terms of health and social care and the comments that Councillor Ferguson made. So yeah, absolutely.
And potentially look at putting you first as well, because you're doing quite a lot of active stuff with the older generation within the region as well.
Thank you. Take Willie and then Gail.
Yeah, Chair, and I think we should recognise the good work that's being done, but it's how we could build on that and develop it, indeed. And I'm looking at the one that Archie just referred to, Active Schools Programme, and whether indeed there is opportunity here from Annan in the east through to Stranraer in the west, in terms of what has been already referred to as the holiday programme. And I know from my frequent visits to the North East of England, Newcastle United has got their Newcastle United Trust, and while it's associated to the football club, it does go round all the schools in Newcastle, just developing health and well-being, participation, activity, and so forth. And to some of our teams, as I've said, the professional clubs, Annan in the east through to Stranraer in the west, that there is an opportunity here for us to develop alongside the professional football clubs, trusts, and the football teams working with the schools in drawing together summer coaching and so forth, where there's a vast amount of, well, to what they charge for these coaching sessions, there could be opportunities there for us working with the football clubs. So it's again to develop and improve on the active clubs, and indeed then expanding it. I know Finlay has been involved in rugby, to some of our rugby teams, and then developing what indeed is the circle there of activities through to swimming, etc. But it's really whether there's an opportunity and to provide facilities during the summer months with some of our professional teams and semi-professional teams in a variety of sport.
If I can respond to the point you make, in terms of the information I'm presenting to you today, in terms of the Active Schools programme, that's only one element of the business. And I think the point there that you made around the professional teams, the football clubs, is we've got our own football development department. One example at the moment is a national initiative that's called Fit for Fans. There's going to be a pilot that's delivered around a physical activity officer in Annandale and Esk. That's the type of programme that, as Richard said, linking to the Health and Wellbeing Unit and the team there, to actually embed that within our holiday programme provision. So I would agree that opportunity is there.
Okay, take Jane, and then final two from Stephen and Andy.
Thank you very much. I very much commend the approach of all of this. However, I will say on the participant sessions and the data that we've got here, what are we going to do about the level of participation of girls? It's going the wrong way.
I agree with you. It's something that we've identified, and in terms of an action, I think that the stats show you that we had a 47% participation 2012-13, and that dropped to 43%. We've actually worked with Sports Scotland. There's an active girls initiative, and we've secured some additional investment that we're going to use directly with our secondary school departments, engaging with Patricia Jarden, who's the P lead officer, with a view to not just working at the S1, S2 age, but actually P6, P7, because I think there's a feeling and kind of the intelligence coming back from the officers within the clusters is that drop-off between the primary and secondary is causing that reduction in the girls' focus. So the Fit for Girls and the Active Girls initiative will be a standalone programme that will be working in the 16 learning communities. We've received that investment and we'll be looking to implement that.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's incredibly important, and I mean, boys, I think, tend to want to get out and do something physical and are much more in tune to that. I think when the schools have a system whereby you go off and you do home study leave, the structure is no longer there, and I think you have to work particularly hard to winkle the girls out of simply saying they're no longer in a system, so they won't participate in that sort of structure. I think it's quite hard work. Can we get some information back on how we're actually doing that? I think it's important.
Just a final point to add on the women and girls. Officers within the team have actually been engaging with clubs as well on a focused topic of women and girls. So actually we've picked up the feedback through the physical activity survey from the young people. We're now going to speak to the clubs and community where we want these women and girls to go and participate, and we can bring that data in, and that will help us shape the Fit for Girls programme as well as linking back to PE.
Okay, right, sorry Gail, you're next.
Perfectly okay. Thanks, Chair. I mean, Richard's obviously highlighted that you're doing a lot more work within education as well, and I think that's a fairly crucial part of this, because historically we've had active schools here, we've had curricular use, extracurricular, and so on and so forth, and we need to start to look at them in their entirety, because if S6 pupils are on, they have study periods during the day, they'll be going. Some of them will be going to the gym, so they are involved in activity within schools, which is not at the moment being documented. And I know that we have leisure and sports staff in some of those facilities. Really, my point at the moment, I think, is in relation to this promotional thing, and then going back to your regular extracurricular and your regular curricular. When you do the promotional activities, maybe we shouldn't be calling them promos actually. They're more often than not in conjunction with a community club. So for instance, that you'll do a cricket taster in the holidays, and the cricket club may pick up some junior coaching on the back of that independently, as does the squash club. What we're not then doing is tracking how many children are staying, and playing squash in a monthly junior handicap or something like that. Now, we put the nucleus in place with the taster, and we do that as an active school project. But then at no point thereafter are we tracking how many of those kids are actually staying in regular sport. Because it's great that they go and play squash for an hour and a half one Tuesday afternoon during the holidays, but if they never do it again, then actually what is the value of that active schools project? So I think what we maybe need to do is look at what we're doing through those taster and promo sort of events and activities, and then make sure that we liaise consistently with the clubs afterwards and just speak to their secretaries and say, how many junior coaching sessions have you had in the last 6 months? How many kids turned up to each of them? And actually that might make the clubs a wee bit more targeted as to how they use their money as well, because they do get funding for these things. They use it, but they're maybe not tracking and monitoring either. And I think there's just that wee disconnect between the clubs and these promo events. So I think we need to track and monitor what they do afterwards.
Completely agree with the point you've made from the school into club transition. At the moment, that's been a nationally recognised gap in terms of monitoring the increase in club membership, and it's kind of taken place in isolation with certain governing bodies and certain clubs. So I think that's an action that we as a team can look to progress alongside the data that we have here, and do that on, and as you say, a more individual club-to-club basis, because the aim of the programme is to take them into the clubs to increase that club membership and that retention. So I think that's an action that we can take on board.
Just in follow-up to that, I think it would be very, very straightforward, because it would be simply a case of, we did a taster session with you in September or October, and through the secretary of that particular club, could you give us some details of what junior coaching has taken place since then, and how many people, kids were involved? And if they don't have that data, they're not doing their job properly either.
Just very quickly, we have sports hubs and sports hub officers, and we have sports councils. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be any tie-up at all. And I know certainly, looking across at the chair of the Stewardship Sports Council, last night we had this debate, as we do every single month, about what the role of the Sports Council is and what the role of the sports hub officers are. I think that may be something that they could do, because they're supposed to be liaising with clubs in the community, and you know, we don't get that information back. So maybe that sports councils and sports hubs something to be looking at.
I think that's something that we as a committee need to look at, because we're funding the sports councils anyway, and I can recall when they were set up 30 odd years ago, they're not fulfilling what they were originally set up to do. They seem to have evolved into a creature of their own, and they certainly don't seem to be fitting in with some of the other things that we are doing. So I think that's something that needs to be reviewed. Quite agree with you. Move on to Stephen and then Andy.
Thanks again, Chair. Councillor Maitland touched on it just with the participation in for females, especially S1. But I was just looking at that graph on page 81 of 94, Appendix 2B. I mean, what do you think actually accounts for the reason why P567 is so high in terms of participant sessions, and then when you get to S1, obviously the female's more noticeable, but even that is less than the participation of P4, and it's progressively worse. So it's really just, I mean, that seems quite a stark drop off. And if, to be fair, even the actual graph is very kind in putting a space there between P7 and S1, because they should actually be right together. So it's really just to get an idea of why that is.
I think the point you raise, it's an observation of the graph there. That's actually a national issue around secondary participation through the programme. There's a couple of local pieces of work that we're looking at where, through the primary PE specialists and the secondary PE curriculum, actually looking to make sure there's more of a synergy there between what's delivered to the children P6, P7, that those activities are then replicated within the secondary curriculum, so that the young people have the skills and confidence to actually remain taking part in PE, but then the part of the work that we deliver is to then stay beyond and take part in the extracurricular opportunities. That, again, links probably back to that PE Pass agenda, where at the moment, I think looking back, perhaps there's not been the efficient working between the three areas. In terms of the drop-off, as I say, that's a national issue, and I can only suggest that the additional investment that's been set aside nationally for the Fit for Girls programme, linked to what Councillor Maitland said, that's one element of programme work to address that. Secondary school provision, we submitted a paper for additional investment for a secondary school sport competition officer. We've now established a secondary school championship, and that is going to be a series of fixtures and events, both inter and intra, between schools and within the locality. The knock-on effect from that will be that those teams and those schools that are competing will need to take part in the extracurricular practice to enable them to go and compete. So I would like to think this was obviously 13-14, with the work that we're doing through the secondary school competition and PE Pass, that we can start to push forward that secondary, that remit. And I would agree with you that that's a gap at the moment.
Just quickly, I mean, I welcome that. It'd be interesting to see how that sort of works out. What I sense from that, though, is if it's a team fixture thing, it's going to be the same participants rather than reaching a sort of wider group of participants. You know, like if you're playing in a league, it's the same. There might be a lot of participation, but it's all the same people, so it's not actually reaching a greater population. So I was just wondering, is there anything that's going to encourage that for a wider audience, as it were?
I mentioned the inter and the intra. It's something that we need to discuss more in detail with our secondary schools and the officers, and there's an initiative, another programme that's called the School Sport Awards, that's about leadership, it's about competition, it's about opportunity, and the emphasis behind that will be for officers within my team, the school and community sport officers, to work with young people in the secondary, to work with the PE department, and part of that is to make sure that competitive opportunities are available, but as you've said rightly, that opportunities exist for those who are perhaps not the most talented, if I can use that terminology. And that's where we need to look at then, are there club coaches who can support, are there young people within that school who can facilitate more sessions, more opportunities, perhaps on-site as well, because then we get past some of the challenges around travel.
Last word on this one to Andy.
Thanks very much, Chair. Ollie, you know me from outside counselling work. I can maybe help a wee bit. Jane was talking there about the drop-off and everything else. You remember, well, Richard knows I was a member of a cross-national governing body working group on the drop-off of teenage girls in particular dropping out of sport. And the findings of that were quite stark. It was because they didn't want to be involved in team sports, they wanted to be involved in individual activities. And the question I'm going to ask you here is that all the emphasis we seem to be putting into this, and I know Mrs. Cooper and the like doing some tremendous work already, but it's in team sport again. Right? We need to focus on the non-team sports, and that's where we've got the major problem in schools, because the economy of scale doesn't allow the school to bring in 10, 20, 30, what we would call in this country minority sports. Other countries actually have mainstream sports. And so how do we get young, because the boys drop off as well, right, when you see it as they're going through the S1s to S6. How do we increase the participation in things like judo, jiu-jitsu, all the martial arts sports, individual swimming, no team swimming, because by that stage, we're kind of looking almost like the elite, and we're picking inter-school swimming teams because they're the best, no because they're just participating. And that is it. How do we get the big bulk of kids who are inactive, active? That's the question. So it's not a new problem. It's been on the go for 15, 20 years or more, I would suggest. So how do we, as a council, address that shortcoming in providing opportunities for youngsters to participate in what are individual or non-mainstream sports?
To kind of give you a summary to the points you've raised, in terms of the individual sports, just from the active schools provision alone, the top 10 activities by the participant sessions were on offer include badminton, include gymnastics, include tennis, and include athletics, which are 4 out of those 10 activities you could say were individual opportunities that were available. In terms of the kind of the minority sports, using that terminology, what we've also got to look and recognise is the club and community groups who are available to us to link in with these young people. Because previous practice within active schools, and again, I draw to a national trend, is if we were to deliver a 4-week block of judo, jiu-jitsu without a follow-on, without a pathway, we're raising expectation and we're increasing skill levels of young people, but then they've not got that opportunity to progress. So there's a balance between looking at what's available in our clubs and our community, linked into the focus sports that we can deliver within the programme.
Yeah, can I come back in? Yeah, but the individual sports you're talking about, Ollie, are the traditional individual sports. Right? There's a whole raft of new sports out there, and this isn't a pop at you, this is hopefully constructive, because I truly believe there are a number in Dumfries alone of martial arts where very, very young children attend. Right? Now, my personal experience was, and Colin will smile here, it was when I had a daughter who wanted to do something which was seen as a minority. If she'd been playing football, there'd been absolutely no problem with getting off school to go and play and represent her country. Because it was a minority sport, it was like, well, that's just a pastime. So I'm kind of coming this with a personal angle as well, is that how do we support the families and these youngsters to actually get into what are serious minority things? And even the sport that my daughter was in, for example, is now in the ice bowl, is almost entirely taken over by either ice hockey, right, or synchro skating. Again, team sports.
Take on board the points that you're raising there, and I think it links back to the comment about taking the intelligence that's coming out through physical activity surveys, what young people would like to see delivered as well. I understand the point you were raising about the direction of travel. I think what we need to do then as well is take the intelligence that's available, take the input from the young people, and draw a balance, because we need to make sure that there is that pathway. So I take on board what you've raised there.
Okay, Gail, final question in this section.
Yeah, it's just a teeny point, and I think it's to keep things in perspective. This is active schools use. This is not every single sports use for every single pupil across Dumfries and Galloway. And I would expect to see a drop-off at secondary, because I think it's much easier to engage primary pupils. It's much easier to get parents to sign up coming an hour later for them after school. We have a rural demographic where kids have to get buses from secondary schools. It's not easy for them to stay for after-school clubs. So when they do, they stay for ones that they specifically want to stay for, not necessarily because active schools have organised it. And I think just in perspective, yes, they are figures that we wouldn't like to see going down, but I don't doubt that there's an awful lot of S1S kids very active in sport. And by the time you get to S6, you're dealing with smaller numbers anyway. So it's not comparable to comparing to your pre-sevens in the first instance. So I think we have to keep it in perspective. We're doing a good job, and it needs to be a wider schools, leisure and sport, and active schools sort of overview. So, you know, the remit isn't entirely with you. I think you've done a good job.
Thank you, Gail. Can we move on now. Colin, can you give us the cultural statistics?
Thank you, Chair. Members, the appendices that relate to my area are appendices 3A to D. So I'll just give you a few seconds to flick through to find them. The areas within my remit are museums and galleries and libraries. And going right to the back, back to the introduction at the start, we found this a very interesting but challenging exercise to undertake. We are looking to create or find a level playing field where we can measure our own performance robustly, but also robustly compare ourselves to other authorities in the region. And as I say, it's been a very interesting exercise. Particular to my own remit, it has been exceptionally challenging because I've got 15 museums and gallery buildings, 24 libraries and 4 mobile libraries, all of which are different and all of which serve different communities. And that's just within our region. So just imagine the challenges we've got when we start to look on a national level. Also on a national level, we have different staffing models and staffing structures which influence. Also, we've got some services across the country that are integrated in one way, shape or form or not. And very similar with the ALIO question, we've got some authorities that deliver in completely different ways and under management regimes. But particular to our own performance, and as noted in the report, our museums are performing quite well and consistently well. In terms of cost per attendance, we are 4th nationally and 1st in our local family group. In attendances, we rank 12th nationally and 1st in our family group. Unfortunately, there has been a slight decline over the 3-year period, but that only equates to around 500 attendances over the 3 years. In terms of libraries, again, we perform not too bad in terms of cost per attendance, 12th nationally, 1st in our local family. However, when it comes to attendance, there has been a drop-off. We are 23rd nationally and 7th in our local family. That equates to a 9.5% drop-off. In terms of the desktop exercise to try and get us to that level playing field, and I re-emphasise the point that we are at the start of this process, I reviewed the information that we collect and submit annually to SITFA in an attempt to identify more robust indicators that allow us to measure performance annually and more accurately and compare with other authorities on a more robust basis. And I think we've reached the starting point, but as I said right in the start of my introduction, it's been an interesting and challenging process, and the information that we've uncovered, I think, will lead us to some natural improvements and an improvement process. For example, the library service, we have approximately 60,000 members across the region. However, only a third of those are active. So how can we get those 66% to become more active or reactivate them? I would also like to say that both the museum service and the library service do deliver excellent services, and this exercise is not in any way intended to undermine that. But particularly to the library service, it's been a service that's relied on the customer coming to it. However, over the last year, we're adopting a more proactive approach and going out to the customer and finding out what they want from us, whether it's a review of the book stock we've got on the shelves, or if it's a review of the internal layout of the building to make them more attractive. What we've also done is we've engaged, did a small piece of research at the recent Youth Reads event, where we engaged with the young children. And the interesting fact that we found out is that 64% of those engaged with were actually members of the library service. But a large majority of them didn't know what we actually did. They came back with things like, we want Wi-Fi, we want free access to PCs, we want online books, we want e-books, e-magazines. All of these things we actually do, so it's now a case of taking that intelligence and rolling up and doing something with it to re-engage with these young people. It's also a case of re-engaging with the older generation. If we look at those that are inactive, the most inactive members are the adult members. So what do we do in terms of reactivating them? They're interested in the library service. So in essence, what we have to do is make our libraries maintain the traditional aspect, make them more fun, make them more engaging, and I think through this process of benchmarking and looking at benchmarking, we will be able to do that. Quite happy to take any questions.
Just looking over the next 4 years, which is obviously the 100-year anniversary commemoration of World War I, and there's a lot of activity within schools to come to libraries and things like that. Are you going to take any information from that to take potential future opportunities and put that into your programme of events?
Councillor, absolutely, that sort of intelligence is absolutely vital. We don't get enough opportunity to engage directly with the audiences. So whenever we get that opportunity, we'll gather that intelligence and put that forward. For example, in the museums, we're just about to get to the stage where we review our forward plan for the next 5 years. That sort of information is going to be absolutely vital.
Can we move on to the recommendations then? Could we approve 2122, 23, 24 and 25, and could we put in a 26, and that's to record our appreciation of the pioneering work done by Ollie and the Active Schools team. I think that should be recorded in the minutes for the work they have done. They're showing a bit of leadership throughout the whole of Scotland for this, so just to let them know that we appreciate the work that their section is doing. And that's not to say the folk in other sections aren't doing a good job as well, but I think they should be specially commended. We can move on to the next item, which is the report on a temporary swimming pool, and I've lost the report somewhere. There we go. Yep, that's the enhanced alternative sports provision. Richard, give us an update.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a report that just provides members with an overview of the current alternative sports provision that was put in place as a result of the DG1 temporary closure, which has now happened. Delighted to inform members that certainly the initial feedback from customers at the temporary pool and indeed at the Lorburn Hall has been very, very positive indeed. Very appreciative of the work that the council has done in terms of providing alternative provision during this the challenging times at DG1. There will also be, Chair, a report coming to the CCS committee in December, which will give members much more detailed information in regard to the legal proceedings, the capital remedial works and the tenders that have just been returned for DG1. And that'll obviously be a detailed report that will come forward to members for their considerations. This is just purely around the enhanced alternative provision, and just to report that it's been very positively received.
Yeah, can I just echo that? I've visited both facilities on a couple of occasions, and I think they're looking really, really good. What's been really heartening is the response from the public, both at the swimming pool and at the Lorburn Hall, that they've taken to both facilities. People, and I know other councillors in Dumfries have had the same thing, folks stopping in the street, folk phoning them up and emailing them, saying how much they appreciate these facilities. Temporary as they may well be, folk are really taking advantage of them, and I think that's to be commended, and I think but proving that our decision to do this was the correct decision to take. We've got the public with us in this one. Is there any questions on the report? Then, Jane.
Just very quickly, 3.7, the Lorburn Hall Trust. Is the decision on the lease, is that something that will be decided on under delegated powers, or will it come back to this committee?
It's not a matter for delegated powers. I mean, there's nothing cast in stone. There's no legal agreements being reached. That they've still got to produce a cogent business plan. Obviously, there's got to be non-compete clauses in there as well, because we ain't handing this over to anybody else so they can compete with DG1. So that's just a holding position. there is a Lower Burn Hall Trust that's been set up, but they're not ready to take over as yet. There's still a fair bit of negotiation to be done on that one. Jane?
Yes, I'm sure the facilities are very fine. What I'd like to know is how many people are actually using them. Because we can say that people are appreciative, but I think it would be important to know that we are actually making use of them. People are making use of them. And if they're not making use of them, then they need to be widely advertised to be sure that people do understand that they're there. A little bit more effort made to get people in. The reason I say that is because I've been along there a couple of times and I found 2 people in the swimming pool. So I'm sure you're right, Chairman. I'm sure you're right that they are much appreciated, but I'd like to know by how many people, and I think we ought to have a report on that, comparing usage with what did happen in DG1 and what's happening there now.
Chair, more than happy to include in the forthcoming DG1 report a summary of attendances and usage at both temporary facilities. Happy to do that. Chair, there was just one other thing, it was remiss of me not to say so, given Councillor Gilroy's comments earlier about capital projects, both the temporary pool and the Loban Hall, both capital projects that were delivered on time and within budget.
Yeah, before we move to the recommendations, I'd just like to say, I've written to all members of staff thanking them for their forbearance during this period, because I think it should be recognised. Staff have been under a fair bit of pressure at DG1, because obviously forecasting what's happening here, etc. They themselves have been unsure if they would have a job, because, at one stage it wasn't sure whether the 2 temporary facilities we've gone ahead with, so people could have lost their jobs. So it's been a fair level of stress for the staff. The fact that they were opened in time and ready to run, and the comments, again, I've had from the public about the staff is excellent, and I really think that we should record that in the minutes, our thanks to the staff for the grand job they have done during this difficult period for them. I think far too often council staff get slagged off, and usually for all the wrong reasons, but I think in this instance it should be recorded in the minutes, our appreciation of the job they've done under these difficult circumstances. And if we can accept the rest of the recommendations, would members agree to that? And the final matter is the minutes of the last meeting, which I took as an extra item. Will have to be distributed. We're online anyway, weren't we? We're online anyway, just put it on the agenda. Members got any issues with the minutes? Members happy to accept the minutes? Thank you very much. If there's no further business, close the meeting. Thank you all very much for attending.